So, Anti-Defamation League tracks anti-Semitism in the U.S. and sometimes across the world. And in this case, they did the ADL Global 100, an Index of Anti-Semitism. Really interesting. Trying to find out how much anti-Semitism is still left in the world, which countries have more of it, less of it, etc. Their criteria was also interesting. I'll get to that in a second. And we found out facts about what people think about Jews that are not necessarily related to anti-Semitism. First of all, first interesting fact is only 54% of adults across the world have heard of the Holocaust. Now, since we hear about it, fairly regularly as part of our education system here in the U.S., etc., that seems like a surprising number. But in my mind, that doesn't indicate any anti-Semitism at all. If you live in Vietnam and you never heard of the Holocaust, why would that make you anti-Semitic? Of course not, right? It's just an interesting fact. Okay. Then here comes the facts about anti-Semitism itself. 26% of those who responded held strongly anti-Semitic views. I'm surprised by that number because honestly I would have thought it was higher. Because I grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in New Jersey. It was a suburb. There was a lot of immigrants, from a lot of different backgrounds, but a lot of Jewish Americans there too. And I think that people would have answered that the number would have been higher. There was so much concern about anti-Semitism. So as high a number as that is, because it's still a terrible thing that over a quarter of the world is anti-Semitic, right? But I guess I expected it to be worse. So I'm weirdly encouraged by that number, right? Now, what did they consider to be anti-Semitic? They had 11 different categories. And you could certainly disagree with that some of these should not be in there, right? But they didn't, it's like if you violated one of these or gave the quote-unquote wrong answer for one of these, they didn't call you anti-Semitic. It was, the general standard was 6 out of 11. You had to answer in the quote-unquote wrong way to be put into that category. So here they are, so you can judge on your own. Jews are more loyal to Israel than their home country. Do you agree or disagree with this, right? Jews have too much power in the business world. Jews have too much power in international finance markets. Jews don't care about what happens to anyone but their own kind. Jews have too much control over global affairs. People hate Jews because of the way Jews behave. In other words, that they deserve it. That's what they're trying to figure out if people think that way. Jews think they're better than other people. Jews have too much control over the United States government. Jews have too much control over the global media. Jews still talk too much about what happened to them in the Holocaust. Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars. Now, again, there could be honest disagreement of, look, the NRA has a lot of power within the U.S. That doesn't make you biased against people in the NRA, so you could argue with some of these categories, but if you really think Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars and they don't care about anyone but their own kind, all that stuff, there's a pretty good chance you're anti-Semitic, right? So now, knowing that, how do people score? The first part you're not going to be surprised by. The Middle East and Northern Africa, unfortunately, was the worst region. 74% agreed with 6 or more of the 11 negative stereotypes. Now, again, that doesn't mean 74% agreed with the worst of the stereotypes or said, I hate Jews, but I just read you the list of the 11 stereotypes so you can judge for yourself what that means. But that's not a good number, right? Obviously. So, outside of the Middle East and North Africa, what country was the most anti-Semitic? Greece. I did not see that coming. 69%. Almost the same as the Middle East and North Africa, where, of course, there's a lot of Muslims. Muslims scored worse, of course, in anti-Semitism, given the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and all the other conflicts that have been going on in the region. They were at 49% overall. Christians were only at 24%. So Greece, which is, of course, largely a Christian nation, scoring at 69% is really surprising. Now, who fared the best? A lot of the English-speaking countries did. 8% anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom, 9% in the US, which actually is a surprisingly high number if you ask me. But then the least anti-Semitic country in the world, Laos. Who saw that coming? Now, it might just be because they don't even know what Jews are. They're like, what's a Jew? I don't know what it is. So how would I hate something I don't know? Sure, yeah, they're fine. Right? So they're like, Jews run the world. Who the hell are they? Right? So that's probably a factor in there too. But good for you, Laos. I like that you're the least anti-Semitic country. That's awesome. Now, round up with some final fascinating facts. 18% believe that the total Jewish population was over 700 million. it's actually only 13.7 million. Is that amazing? I think both numbers are amazing, that people think it's that high, and the reality is that it's actually that low. So only 13.7 million Jews. Amazing. All right, and I'm also blown away by this because I grew up in the US, in the New York area, Miami Beach, LA, so my experience is totally different, but 74% of respondents across the world had never met a Jewish person. But actually, when you see that there's only 13.7 million Jews, that's not a surprising number at all, but it's surprising in our context. So fascinating numbers, okay? So overall, of course, we got to do better. Let's bring those numbers down, okay, on the issue of anti-Semitism, but probably a lot better than we would have seen in decades past.